Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. You may notice that I'm back to the computer cam, as I need to work on the professional camera to get it properly into focus, and that will be happening soon, and very soon, God willing. As you can see from the title, I am doing a response video really to Ali Dawa's recent shocking admission about Dodgy Dawa, and the fact that there are indeed what everyone has been telling him for a long time, and all of his fans, there are no scientific miracles in the Quran. And finally, he's been big enough to admit it. And this admission, it has some major implications. For instance, this admission, it condemns decades worth of dawah. Decades and decades of dawah has been shown to be based entirely on a faulty premise. It throws away and throws in the bin, as he said, the poop bin. It throws away recordings of talks. It throws away leaflets. It throws away entire YouTube videos of Islamic Dawah as now being built completely on a faulty premise. It's been thrown in the dustbin of history. And it also validates people like me who've been saying that there aren't Quranic miracles. We've been saying that, and we've been telling him that, and we have been telling his followers and his supporters and other Muslims that for a very long time, that actually no, the Quran has no miracles inside of it. So it basically proves that we were right all along. So, thank you very much there. And it also admits, and in his video, if you watch it, and I'm sure some of you are already familiar with it because he's got a much bigger YouTube channel than I do, that he admits that dawagandists have known. This is the key point. They knew for a while. We don't know how long, but we knew for a while. But he mentioned himself a few years that it was from a few years ago that they've been using dodgy arguments, and yet they continued to use them. And the reality is that this is part of a series of retreats that Islamic propaganda has had to make in the face of facts and in the face of evidenced argument, which is the kind of argument that the Christian apologists have been making against Muslims on lots of different fronts connected to the debate between Islam and Christianity. Now, on a personal note, I want to actually applaud Ali Dawa. He's actually embodied a more mature worldview, a more adult worldview, a worldview that's far more sensible, and a worldview that's far more intelligent and intelligible. And I applaud him for it, because personal growth, even in your worst enemy, should always be applauded. He's not my worst enemy, by the way, but he is an enemy of the church, and therefore he is an enemy of mine. And but he has grown. He's grown intellectually through this admission. And he has basically admitted what we Christians have been saying for the longest possible time, and what we Christians have been arguing for the longest possible time, which is that dawagandists have been basically abusing their own Quran and reading into the Quran things that weren't there, and that they have been doing it for decades. So there we go. Yet another victory of Christian apologetics, yet another victory of Christian polemics. Not just us, I'll be honest, atheists have also got this one as well. You know, it's a joint goal between the two of us. And I want to say I agree with him. He's right in the way that he tries to frame his worldview as a Muslim. It is now far more Islamic in the sense that it rejects the scientific paradigm and says that the scientific paradigm has to be judged by the Islamic paradigm. And that's a far better way to do Islamic exegesis of the Quran. And I also want to applaud him for adopting a position that I've been saying for 6 years at the corner. I've been arguing this for 6 years. Whenever this issue has come up, I've always presented the fact that science and religion have to be treated differently, and we're going to talk about why I've made that argument a bit later in this reaction. Now, obviously, I'm not playing the video, and the reason why I'm not playing the video is because I just don't trust them not to try and strike me. You do a YouTube strike without honesty and integrity, even though legally I could, because I'll be using it for commentary and discussion. But I do want to point out, though, Ali, if you ever do watch this, I doubt that you will. You're probably too busy with all your cash. But the reality is you still don't understand science, mate, and you don't understand how scientific paradigms work. Because you make a reference to the idea of the Big Bang as being disproven. No one is arguing that. That's only people that don't understand how science works are making those kind of statements. Recent observations draw into question certain things, but they don't draw into question the idea of the Big Bang. And the reason for that is because as science develops from paradigm to paradigm, as it grows from one understanding to another, anything that is established through verifiable observation is simply enfolded in the new paradigm. It doesn't disappear. And so, for instance, Isaac Newton's understanding of gravity was simply enveloped inside Einstein's understanding of gravity. It's not that one thing replaced the other one. And so, you know, you've corrected yourself in how you speak about the Quran, and I applaud you for that. But you're now just, again, talking into the realms of science when you're just not qualified to do so. And you really should stop. You really should stop, because it's a little embarrassing to have to listen to you pontificate on stuff that you don't know anything about. And so for us as Christians who are doing polemics and apologetics with regards to Islam, we can count this as yet another victory, a one of many. So, for instance, other examples would be Christians have won the argument about whether the Quran has been changed or not. Christians have won the argument about whether all Qurans are identical or not. Christians have won the argument over whether the Bible teaches the Trinity. Christians have won the argument over whether the Bible teaches the divinity of Christ. Christians have won the argument over slavery. We've won the argument over colonialism. We've won the argument over, over whether over questions of morality, over whether Jesus or Muhammad is a better example. Again and again and again and again and again, we Christians are winning the intellectual argument. But then Ali Dawa goes into a giant boast about, oh, people are coming into the fold of Islam. And that's undeniable. There's no point denying this. It's reality. Lots of people are becoming Muslims. It's sadly through the work of people like Ali Dawa, it's becoming a little bit cool to become a Muslim. But the reason why people are going into Islam has got nothing to do with its intellectual robustness. The reason why they're going into Islam is for sociological reasons. It's because of the strong identity that Muslims are offering to the West when people are becoming disillusioned with liberalism. It's because of their Benedict options providing strong communities along with that identity, and their strong criticism of liberalism. And if I can say something to my Christian brothers and sisters, it's this: don't let the devil have all the best weapons, right? Even more important than you preaching the gospel. And I mean this sincerely. I'll say it again so you don't, I'll do it, Ali Dawa. I'll say it again so you don't think I misspoke. Even more important than your preaching of the gospel is your need to cultivate a strong Christian identity. Even more important than your preaching of the gospel is your need to develop a Christian critique of liberalism. You need to know as Christians where, and you need to know as Christians where the Enlightenment stops and Christianity begins. You need to be able to separate the church from liberal Western secular humanist society. And then in addition to that, preach the gospel. In addition to that, use polemics and apologetics, because it's when you present a robust, muscular, strong Christian identity with a robust, strong critique of liberalism and liberal secularism, and you present it within strong communities, then people will come back to the church. A lot of Christians have just got to realize that they don't know as much about the world as they think they do, and that just preaching Christ crucified and Christ resurrected, whilst it is the heart of the Christian message, no doubt, it is not cutting through. And it's not cutting through because of other reasons that you haven't even begun to consider. And so Christians need to double down and to build up our identity as Christians, and to build it up in such a way as that it responds to both liberalism and Islam. And he was there. Well, before we get on to that, let's continue. And as Christians, we've got to express that strong faith as a culture and as a comprehensive identity, because that's the world that we're living in, a world that is looking for identity, a world that is looking for a strong culture. And we can't do that unless we embrace and unless we do not shrink from the inevitability of conflict. Because if you're going to do what I'm suggesting you're going to do, or you should do, then conflict is inevitable. Conflict naturally follows. And so we've got to be comfortable with that by drawing strength from the martyrs, by drawing strength from the confessors, and by illuminating, highlighting, raising up, celebrating, and cultivating the cult of martyrdom and the cult of being a confessor, and supporting and having solidarity with confessors and martyrs. And we've got to reorganize our churches and our church fellowships to embody these goals, to embody what I've just talked about. And one of the simplest options that we can do to make that happen is the Benedict option. And through all of this, and particularly this, we've got to magnify Christianity more. We've got to magnify Christianity as a way of life, and we've got to magnify Christianity as an alternative. You see, part of what helps Islam to grow, and I'm guilty of being part of this problem, is that it's now everyone is criticizing Islam, and so it draws people to Islam. And that's a reality. But at the same time, we can't stop criticizing Islam, because eventually these criticisms will become mainstream, and Muslims are not shy about criticizing Christianity. So we shouldn't stop. But what we're lacking is what we need to build up, and I've tried to highlight that to you. Now, the reason why Ali Dawa does this taunt about Islam growing is because by doing this taunt, he hopes to discourage us. He hopes to discourage the likes of me, but he doesn't understand what inspires me. I'm not doing this because of my ego or because I think I can make myself better than Ali Dawa. I'm doing this because I love and am inspired by my Lord Jesus Christ. And so there's no way, Ali, that you can discourage me. There's no way that you can put me off. There's no way that you can make me back down. The reality is that as much as you boast and as much as you try to taunt, I laugh at your taunts. I laugh at your taunts, my friend. And I laugh at the taunts of all of you Islamists, because at the end of the day, your caliphs are all dead. Your caliphates are all dead, but the church is still here. Doesn't matter which caliphate you point to, it's dead, my friend. Your Sharia law is dead, my friend, but the Church of Jesus Christ is still here. You tried and have tried for 1400 years to destroy the truth of the gospel, and yet it still goes out into the Muslim world, and you can't stop us. And that, my friend, is why you can't taunt me. You know, but what he forgets to tell you is that Islam is dying in Tunisia. He forgets to tell you that Islam is dying in Indonesia. He forgets to tell you that Islam is dying in Iran. He forgets to tell you that Islam is dying in Kurdistan. By the way, he's a Kurd. He forgets to tell you that right now, Christians know that there is an explosion of Christianity starting in Afghanistan, a country that's just had Sharia law imposed upon it, a country that was betrayed by the West when we abandoned those poor people to Sharia bullies. But yet the church did not abandon them. The church is now growing in Afghanistan right now. North Korea abandoned Sharia law. Islam is dying. Not North Korea, North Sudan, sorry. North Sudan has abandoned Sharia law, and Islam is dying in North Sudan. So he tries to boast. Well, we can boast too, my friend, but our boasts are greater than yours, because the caliphate that was established by Muhammad is dead, my friend. It's dead. But the church founded by Jesus Christ is still here. But now the debate about the scientific miracles of the Quran is closed. Now Ali Dawa admits that we Christians were right all along. What about the scientific errors inside the Quran? You see, there's still a debate there, isn't there? Because you've admitted, Ali, that we were right when we said you were wrong about the scientific miracles inside the Quran. But we didn't just stop there, did we? We also said to all of you Muslims that your Quran has scientific errors in it. So let's look at some of those scientific errors. So I'm using, by the way, a great version of the Quran written by Robert Spencer. I encourage you to get it. It's called The Critical Quran, and it's got lots of commentaries. His focus is to do with he focuses on the Quranic roots to Islamism, and so that's what he highlights. So unfortunately, I think he misses the opportunity to point out a lot of the scientific and other historical errors inside the Quran, but he does do a great job in showing that the Islamist violence that we are all experiencing around the world is actually rooted in this book. And he does it through quoting commentators, classical Muslim commentators. But let's look at some of the scientific errors in the Quran. So one of them, and I'm only going to do two, well, I'm actually going to do three, but one of them is the fact that the Quran says the earth is flat. Yep, that's right. A book that claims to be perfect, a book that claims to be free from error. And I'll quote what the Quran says. It says, if this were from any other than Allah, they, meaning people like me, would find many errors in it. So now that we've settled the argument that you were all wrong when you said that the Quran had scientific miracles in it, let's look to see if there are scientific errors in the Quran. So in Surah Taha, Ayah 53, I'm not going to do this at length because this isn't really the point of this video. It says, he has established the earth as a bed. As a bed? What shape are beds? Yep, not round, not spherical. Oh, flat. The Quran is describing the earth as flat. And it does it in multiple places. I'm literally picking one, but you can just find out yourself how many other verses there are that describe the earth as flat, as a carpet in other places. I am yet to see a person sleep on a spherical bed. Perhaps you can find me one. But the Quran is saying that the earth is established. He, Allah, has established the earth as a bed and has threaded roads for you in it and has sent down water from the sky, and by it we have brought forth various kinds of vegetation. So there's a scientific error in the Quran. But here's another one. Here's another one. And actually, we're getting, this one's a good one because you get 2 for 1 here, Ali. It's a 2 for 1 deal. I hope you enjoy it. But it says here, and the sun runs on to a resting place for him. That is the measuring of the mighty, the wise one. And the moon, we have appointed mansions until she returns like an old shriveled palm leaf. It is not for the sun to overtake the moon, nor does the night surpass the day. They each float in an orbit. So the Quran is saying that the sun and the moon orbit the earth. It's orbiting the earth. It's saying that night never surpasses day, so that night and day can never meet. Well, what about a solar eclipse, Ali? Maybe you don't understand what I'm trying to say to you guys, because let's be honest, some people are just very dense. And I mean that specifically with regards to Muslims who are defending scientific miracles in the Quran, even when your dawagandists are telling you that they're not there. But let me just show you something. Now, hopefully you can all see this. This is a... So
Oh! 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 Oh, qué lindo, oh,
So, guys, hopefully, let me just get back to me. Where am I? Did you all see that? I just want to make sure that that video worked. Could you just confirm, guys, that you saw that video? Because I was looking at the video rather than this screen here. I couldn't see this screen. I know it takes it. Yes, thank you. Brilliant. Now, let's just watch it again. But I want you to listen to these words carefully. Yeah? We'll just watch it one more time and listen to the words of the Quran. Because the Quran has scientific errors in it. Ready? It is not for the sun to overtake the moon, nor does the night surpass the day. It is not for the sun to overtake the moon, nor does the night surpass the day. It is not for the sun to overtake the moon, nor does the night surpass the day. They each float in an orbit. So, the Quran has got it completely wrong. The Quran has stated that night does not surpass the day. You see it with your own eyes. The night surpasses the day. What is night? Night is the absence of direct sunlight. That's what night is. It's not the absence of sunlight, it's the absence of direct sunlight. And that is exactly what happens in a solar eclipse. You have the absence of direct sunlight. You have a shadow. The night overtakes the day. The Quran gets it wrong. But this verse says something else that is supported by lots of other Islamic literature, I hasten to add. We'll read it again. The sun runs on to a resting place for him. And that is the measuring of the mighty, the wise one. And for the moon we have appointed mansions until she returns like an old shriveled palm leaf. So it's talking about the sun and the moon orbiting the earth. And you see it in other literature, it's this idea that the sun descends to beneath the throne of Allah and then is commanded to return back to where it came from until such a day as Allah commands it to go in the opposite direction. So the Quran is stating, and the moon passes through these mansions. Now, these mansions appear in other cultures as well. They're the 12 mansions of the 12 mansions of the sky. And this is where we get the idea of 12 hours in the day from, that Jesus references when he talks about, are there not 12 hours in a day? It's also in Egyptian culture as well. They talk about the 12 houses of the sky that things move through. This is a common reoccurrence in lots of cultures. It's not unique to the Quran, but it all assumes a geocentric orbit. It assumes a geocentric orbit. Now, one of the things that Ali said in his video is he said that Muslims shouldn't read into the Quran what is not there because they don't have the authority to do that. They don't have the learning to do that. They don't have the authority to read into the Quran something that the Quran is not saying. And they can't use the scientific paradigm to read into the Quran because that's making the scientific paradigm superior to the Islamic Quranic paradigm. So what he's saying is that only those of learning should be saying what the Quran is saying. So, Ali, let me show you that I am not making it up. Let me show you that it isn't me that is stating that the Quran is talking about a geocentric orbit. Muslim scholars are saying this. Let me play you one. Bear with us 1 second. Now, okay, guys, hopefully you can all see that. I cannot see you. Yeah, okay, good. You can all see that. Let me just expand that a little bit. Oh, I recognize that last video might not have been too great, but hopefully you still saw it. Let me just expand that out. What's that looking like? That's better, isn't it? Okay. And then I think I need to put sound in. Hold on a minute. I might have to try this again. Mute screen audio. No. Right, let's just play it and see what happens. And play the advert.
Parisian Hotel.
Right.
Join me for a weekend of life's finer things. I'm looking for someone who enjoys Michelin star
Confirm the
dining.
audio is coming through,
Views
guys.
like no other, exceptional company, the most exquisite decor.
Or on
And
anyone. Is the
croissant
audio
you'll
coming
dream
through?
about for years. So be
You hear
spontaneous
it.
and come
Good.
see
Thanks
me.
very much.
You're perfect somewhere.
Christianity's
Let's
unstoppable.
rendezvous at hotels.com.
Now listen to the scholar. Oh, let's skip that ad. Oh yeah, clearly it's a right-wing website and it was made up by Christians.
في الآية الكريمة يقول أستفسر عن هذه الآية والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. هل الشمس تدور حول الأرض؟
بلا شك هذا هو ما دل عليه القرآن. والشمس تجري، هم يقولون لا الشمس واقفة والأرض هي اللي تجري، هذا عكس ما جاء في القرآن. وإبراهيم عليه السلام قال للنمرود إن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق تأتي بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر. كوننا نترك ما دل عليه القرآن ونأخذ بالنظريات الحديثة هذا لا يكون من المسلم. ويجب على المسلم أن يتبع القرآن. الله جل وعلا يقول ما أشهدتهم خلق السماوات والأرض ولا خلق أنفسهم وما كنت متخذ المضلين عضدا. نعم.
والشمس تدور حولها.
نعم.
فهل هذا موافق لما موجود في القرآن والسنة؟
هذا اللي في القرآن.
الأدلة على
أن الأرض هي المركز والشمس تدور عليها. الدليل قول الله تبارك وتعالى وترى الشمس إذا طلعت تزاور عن كهفهم ذات اليمين وإذا غربت تقرضهم ذات الشمال. فأضاف الله الطلوع والغروب إلى الشمس وأضاف إليها التزاور والقرض. وقال الله عز وجل والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. فظاهر القرآن أن الشمس هي التي تدور على الأرض، ويجب علينا أن نأخذ بهذا الظاهر ونقول الأرض هي المركز والشمس تدور عليها والقمر يدور عليها والنجوم تدور عليها. حتى أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لأبي ذر وقد غربت الشمس أتدري أين تذهب؟ قال الله ورسوله أعلم. قال فإنها تذهب وتسجد تحت العرش فتستأذن فإن أذن لها وإلا رجعت من حيث جاءت. هذا صحيح.
يقول السائل هل اعتقاد بأن الأرض تدور حول الشمس كما يقول الفلكيون يعتبر من الكفر؟
أقول الذي دل عليه القرآن والسنة أن الدوران للشمس هي التي تدور تمشي والأرض ثابتة. ومن الأدلة على أن الأرض ثابتة والشمس هي التي تمشي وتجري الحديث الصحيح، وهو أن يوشع بن نون صلى الله عليه وسلم خليفة موسى وهارون عليه الصلاة والسلام وارث النبوة بعدهما دنا من بيت المقدس وقد مالت الشمس إلى الغروب فقال إنك مأمورة وأنا مأمور اللهم فاحبسها علينا. فحبسها الله عز وجل حتى دخل ذلكم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بيت المقدس وفتحها الله عليه. فلو كانت الأرض هي التي تدور لكان خطاب هذا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم للشمس لغو، والأنبياء منزهون. نعم، هذا يعني القول بأن الشمس هي الثابتة هذا تكذيب للقرآن والسنة، وهي نظرية كافرة، والفلكيون أكثرهم جهال. نعم.
فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون.
So there you go, guys. There you go. Muslim scholars, remember what Ali Dawa said? He said that we should not read into the Quran what we are not qualified to read into the Quran. Well, I think that 3 sheikhs are probably more qualified than a glorified dawagandist, and they are all telling him and his fanboys and his sheeple and those brainless people that are just so amazed that they've got this celebrity on YouTube, so they take the Shahada and they never even think for a second for themselves. They're telling you that the sun goes around the earth. They're telling you that because their Quran tells them that, and their Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad tells them that. And it's all BS. It's rubbish. The Quran has got it wrong. And we have you banged to rights by your own logic. We're quoting your own scholars to you. It's your logic that we're using, your Quran that we're using, your Sunnah that we're using, your Hadiths that we're using, your scholars that we're using. And they are telling you that the sun goes around the earth. So tell me, Ali Dawa, do you know better than your sheikhs? Do you know better than your ulama? Of course you don't. You wouldn't dare go on camera to say that you know better. Or maybe you do. Maybe you would. Maybe your ego is that big. But the Quran has scientific errors in it. Talks about a flat earth. It says that the night can't overtake the day, which you can see with your own eyes that it does. And it says that the earth, the sun and the earth have a geocentric relationship. Now, I want to know, to all you dawagandists, do you know better than your sheikhs? Do you know better than your ulama? Now, I've had this translation checked by an Arabic speaker. I think it's fair to say that the Arabic translation isn't 100% perfect, but the basic point that I'm making, that these sheikhs do affirm that the sun is going around the earth, is being affirmed in the Arabic. And there'll be other Arabic speakers who are Christians, hopefully, who will comment in the section. And maybe there'll even be honest Muslim who can speak Arabic, who can confirm that that is indeed what the sheikhs are saying. And I challenge you to be honest. Remember, you're supposed to speak against yourselves if it's about speaking for the truth. So do the sheikhs affirm that the sun is going around the earth? Now, the reality is that the Quran is just going up against hard facts. Those facts will never change. It will never change the idea that the earth goes around the sun. Now, I just want to say to you, if you're a Muslim who has been duped by one of these false arguments into giving your Shahada, if you were manipulated at Speaker's Corner by the crowd being pressed in on all sides and by the peer pressure and by, being led by a series of affirmations, one after the other, to be tricked into giving the affirmation of, do you want to give your Shahada? Do you want to become a Muslim? The yes, yes, yes salesman trick. If you have been tricked by these bad dawagandists, you don't have to stick to a bad decision. If you recognize, as I have demonstrated, that the Quran has got clear errors in it, you don't have to keep barreling down a path of error and mistake. You can just come out of it, like lots of Muslims are coming out of it. Nearly as many Muslims leave Islam in America as join it. And as I've already stated, Islam is collapsing in entire parts of the Islamic world. There are some parts. Iran is now the first post-Islamic nation. And there's going to be other Islamic nations, with other post-Islamic nations within my lifetime. You don't have to keep being a gullible idiot. You can snap out of it if you have the courage to think for yourself, if you have the courage to think outside of the group. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do, Muslims. You don't have to keep buying into the Islamic lies now that they are being exposed one by one. Because the obvious question is if they got the whole scientific argument wrong, which they have, and we are going to win this debate as well. Yeah, we've won the debate about there being no scientific miracles in the Quran. Now we are going to win the argument about whether there are scientific errors in the Quran. You don't have to keep buying into one lie after another. We've demonstrated to you that that the Quran has been changed. The other kinds of bad arguments that Muslims have used that are popular amongst Muslims that I hear are things like, colonialism. Christianity is evil because of colonialism. I'm sorry, Islam has practiced colonialism for 1400 years. Until you give back Egypt to the Copts and Algeria to the Berbers and Sudan to the Nubians, until you reverse Arabization across the Islamic world, I'm not interested in your lectures on colonialism. The idea that another bad argument that Muslims make is that Christianity is a white man's religion. I'm sorry, Islam is an Arab man's religion. You have to bow to an Arab city, read an Arabic book, pray in Arabic, and copy the behaviors of an Arab man. And then you talk to me about Christianity being about white supremacism. Why aren't you talking about Arab supremacism? Why do I have to be confronted by the comical picture of an African black man or a white European dressed as an Arab trying to speak Arabic to me as if that convinces me that Islam is true? Arabization, Arab superiority, Arab colonialism. That is what Islam is. The idea that the Quran's is identical, that all Qurans were identical, well, that's an argument you lost, because you have accepted now something that we Christians have been telling you, that there are different textual versions of the Quran, and you call them qira'at. You even admit it now. They're not the same. They do have different words. That the Quran has never been changed. Well, why do we see variant Qurans in your earliest copies of the Quran compared to your most recent version of the Quran? That's another argument you lost. The idea that Jesus wasn't crucified. You've given up on the classical commentaries of Ibn Kathir because we have made you, because we have beaten you in argument. And all these silly kind of arguments that you make about the Trinity, about 1 can't be 3 and 3 can't be 1 and 1 + 1 + 1 and so on. It's all silly, childish arguments, because none of it actually argues against what we believe as Christians. These are just jokes. These are just Muslim jokes that you have amongst yourselves that you try to present to us as if they are arguments. And they're not. They're just signs of your own ignorance. You try to present Islam as being special because it teaches a belief in one God. Loads of religions believe in one God. There were Egyptian religions long before Christianity or Islam that believed in one God. There's nothing special about the belief in one God. I mean, it's a true belief, but it's not special. Satan believes in one God. When you boast about believing in one God, you're essentially boasting about as being as good as Satan. I mean, if that's as high as you can reach, then you guys are in trouble, because if that's your ceiling, well, guys, here's news for you. For a Christian, that's our floor. So I want to say to you, a lot of you guys out there have been sold a dodgy car when you were sold the Islamic arguments. There's lots of dodgy Islamic arguments out there, and many of you took your shahada based upon essentially being manipulated and lied to. It's time to leave. It's time to leave. De-invest, decouple, and get out. And the truth, my friends, is in the Christian faith. And so, you know, I invite you not to think like sheeple of these celebrities who, I think personally, the reason why Ali Dawa is doing this is because he and his group think that the time is right to steal a bit of the market from Zakir Naik, who's making a fortune out of dawagandism. And it's a great market. It's a good moneymaker. And by stealing some of Zakir Naik's market, they are boosting themselves. And I think that's the reason for this. That's the reason to attack, because that's Zakir Naik's big selling argument, isn't it? So by Ali Dawa attacking this argument, he's attacking Zakir Naik. And Zakir Naik's huge pyramid of support, if that even disintegrates by 10% that move over to support Ali Dawa, he's going to be in the money. Now, I want to present to you the reason why Christianity is a better way of life. Okay? And I'm going to stick to the theme of science. Okay? Now, Christianity, science has always been done by human beings since forever. It is not particular. It's not something that Christians invented. We, as human beings, participated in it in the same way that every other human civilization has, to some degree. But that being said, particularly within the Latin Western Christendom, science was allowed to take nest, to have a place at the table in a way that other cultures never gave it a special place. And it's for that reason that, without boast or without kind of cultural arrogance, I can honestly say that the scientific paradigm, of which we are now all beneficiaries in the entire world to some degree, emerged in the Christian West. And it did so because the natural philosophers, who were all inspired by the Christian faith, were seeking as a spiritual exercise to draw closer to God through the study of the natural world. And any historian of science will tell you the same. It was the Christian milieu, the Christian paradigm, that allowed the scientific paradigm to emerge. And I think that the reason why it emerged, particularly in the West, and you know, this can be subject to debate, but this is my presentation, it's my emendation, it is my suggestion to you, is because Christians in the West didn't reject reason and philosophy. We didn't reject reason and philosophy in the same way that the Islamic world did. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote all of his works, and particularly Summa Theologia, to show how reason and revelation went together. And the church made him a doctor of the faith. In other words, he was stuck on a pedestal and taught, and he was declared before everyone, if you want to learn about what it is to follow the Christian faith, read Thomas Aquinas. And that meant that the Christian worldview had a place for reason and had a place for philosophy. There was, unlike as in Islam, there was no rejection of Greek philosophy in Christianity. Just one example that I would give to that is about the life of Averos. Probably mispronouncing his name. Averos, and to try and put a bit of a Spanish on it, during the Islamic occupation of Spain, which, thanks be to God, was overturned during the Reconquista. Averos was a philosopher who lived in Islamic Spain, a Muslim who fought tirelessly. He fought tirelessly to try and convince his Muslim compatriots to not reject philosophy and reason. To his credit, I credit him. However, he was considered to be a deviant, and he was banished to Lucena in 1195. And he was banished by Abu Yusuf, who was the caliph at the time, waging yet another jihad against the Christians of Spain. He was banished because the theologians, the ulama, the ones who dominated the Islamic court, were offended by his attempt to reconcile reason and revelation. Because Averos was trying to, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, Averos, yeah, I think so. He was trying to convince them that reason would allow them to perceive more and to achieve more than just using Arabic sources alone. There's that Arabization again. And so he was sent away in disgrace. He was allowed to return eventually. He was allowed to return, but his intellectual experiment was basically rejected by the Islamic world. And just to show you that, I'm going to read ruling on the study of philosophy by an Islamic scholar from an Islamic website called Islam QA. And this is reading directly from it. It says this: the majority of the fuqaha, probably mispronouncing that as well, have stated that it is haram to study philosophy. Among their comments on that are the following. Ibn Nujaym, who's in Hanafi school, said that al-ashba wal nazaim, acquiring knowledge may be an individual obligation, which is as much as one's needs for religious commitment to be sound, or it may be a communal obligation, which is in addition to the previous and is done for the benefit of others, or it may be recommended, which is studying fiqh and ilm al-kab, the purification of the heart in depth, or it may be haram, which is learning philosophy, magic. So the Muslim scholar is comparing philosophy to magic, astrology, geomancy, natural science, and witchcraft. These are haram. Natural science is right in there with witchcraft. And you wonder why the Islamic world has fallen behind. Al-Dawah, who's a Maliki, he said this. He said in Al-Shar al-Kabir, discussing the kind of knowledge which is a communal obligation, such as studying Sharia, which is not an individual obligation, and which includes fiqh, tafsir, hadith, and aqidah, and things that help with that, such as Arabic, grammar, and literature, tafsir, and mathematics, and usul al-fiqh, not philosophy, astrology. So he sticks philosophy in with astrology, or ilm al-kalam, according to the most sound opinion. I'll read one more. Zakaria Ansari, who is from the Shafi school, said in Asna al-Matalib, as for learning philosophy, magic, astrology, geomancy, natural science, and witchcraft, it is haram. I've got Maliki, I've got Shafi. Let's do an Hanbali one as well. Bear with us, just so that you've... Yep. So Al-Bahuti from the Hanbali school said in Kashaf al-Kina, the opposite of Shari knowledge is knowledge that is haram or makruh. Haram knowledge is like ilm al-kalam, in which they argue on the basis of pure reason or speak in a manner that contradicts sound, unambiguous reports. So in other words, he's saying you place hadiths above reason. If they speak on the basis of reports only or on the basis of text and rational thought that is in accordance with them, then this is the basis of the religion and the way of al-Sunnah. This is what is meant by the words of Sheikh Taqi al-Din. In his commentary, he explains that even better. Haram knowledge also includes philosophy, magic, astrology, and geomancy, as well as alchemy and natural sciences. End quote. So I just quoted to you all of these sources, and this is what Ali Dawa repeated. He said that you take the scientific paradigm and you place it above the scientific paradigm. Whereas the Christian tradition says that reason and revelation go together. They integrate together. One is not above the other. They intermesh, they dovetail. And that, my friends, is just one of the many reasons why the Christian worldview is better than the Islamic worldview. Christians have always been at home with philosophy. We used philosophy when the church first emerged out of a Jewish sect, emerged out of the Jewish world. We immediately started using philosophy because that was the lingua franca of the Greek culture into which we were doing missionary work, the Hellenized culture into which we were doing missionary work. And so Christians have always been in bed with the use of reason. And that's why Thomas Aquinas was supported in his intellectual endeavor when Averos, even though he was doing exactly the same thing as Thomas Aquinas, he was rejected. That's why Thomas Aquinas was made a doctor. And that relationship with reason is exactly why the scientific paradigm emerged in the West and not in the Islamic world. It isn't to say that Muslims weren't doing science or mathematics, not saying that at all. But the paradigm as we experience it emerged out of the West. It was then duly hijacked by the Enlightenment as a stick with which to beat Christianity, but that's an entirely different story. Okay. But so Christianity places limits on science. It restricts science to the use of material things and the discussion around material things, and reserves to the Christian faith discussion around how science should be used and to what ends it should be used. So in other words, the questions of why and value, the Christian faith restricts to the church, but the questions of how and what of the material world, it allows science to go free rein. I just want to quote to you, and maybe I should have read this at the first. So this is Johannes Kepler, the one who first suggested to the Western world that actually it was a heliocentric cosmology, not a geocentric cosmology, like the Quran tries to tell us. It says, and Johannes Kepler said this. This is a Christian speaking. He said, "The wisdom of the Lord is infinite, as are also his glory and his power. Ye heavens, Sing his praises. Sun, moon, and planets glorify him in your ineffable language. Praise him, celestial harmonies, and all ye who can comprehend them. And thou, my soul, praise thy Creator. It is by him and in him that all exist. Galileo Galilei said that mathematics is the language with which God has written the universe. Louis Pasteur said that the more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Science brings men nearer to God. The reality is, Christians and Christianity has always been at home with science and is not anti-science. Though Christians also try to abuse science in exactly the same way that Muslim dawagandists have. And I encourage you to not do that. Like the Bible is not a scientific textbook. Don't treat it like one. And Ali Dawa has kind of moved closer to that position now. But the difference is that I, as a Christian, can say science and religion go like this. Ali Dawa says that religion and science go like that. And the problem is, when you take that attitude, Ali Dawa now, if he's consistent to what he has said, which I don't believe he will be for a second, but if he is consistent to what he has said, he should argue for a geocentric orbit. And he won't, because he is smarter than his Quran. And he is smarter than the genuine ulama who teach a geocentric orbit as being taught in the Quran and the Sunnah. And let's face it, the guy's making a living doing this. So he's not going to exactly cut away his financial base, is he? So, as a Christian, I believe that we can reason from facts to the attributes of God. If you atheists thought you were getting off lightly in this conversation, you're wrong. And I want to explain to you why I believe that. In Romans chapter 1, bear with us 1 second. One second. Romans chapter 1, reading from verse 18, we read this. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. Okay. For God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteous suppress the truth. Since what can be known about God is evident amongst them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what he has made. As a result, people are without excuse. So, bear with us 1 second. So Theodorat of Cyrus said this: nature taught humanity both that God is the creator of all things and also that they should flee unrighteousness and embrace righteousness. But even when teachers were given to them, they did not live up. Teachers were given to them, they did not live up to this. So God threatened them with future punishment. This punishment is called the wrath of God, not because God punishes people for any emotional reason, but in order to stun those who rebel against him. Saint Augustine said this: notice that Paul does not call them ignorant of the truth, but says that they held the truth in iniquity. And he does not fail to answer the obvious question: how could those whom God had not given the law have a knowledge of the truth? For he says that through the visible things of the creation, they reach an understanding of the invisible things of the Creator. So our church fathers, centuries before this debate, centuries before the rise of science, were teaching that nature tells us truths about God. And even before the Gospels, even before the writings of Paul, in the writings of David, 1,000 years before Christ, in his Psalms, we read these words. For the heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of his hands. Day after day they pour out speech, night after night. They communicate knowledge. There is no speech, there is no words, their voice is not heard. Their message has gone out to the whole earth, and their words to the ends of the world. Now, the amazing thing about science is that it requires a language. Like the language of science is mathematics. But we are not creating that language. We're not imposing that language on the universe. We're discovering it. And I'm going to give you a reason why we're discovering it. That the accuracy that mathematics has is unreasonable if it was just a man-made language. I think Einstein's theory of E equals mc squared has a power of description that, if memory serves me correct, is something like 10 to the power of 14. If we were to visualize that as to put it as a physical expression, it means that you can use that mathematical formula to predict things to a degree thinner than this piece of paper. That's how accurate that theory is. That's how accurate that description is. Its power of description. That is beyond human computation in the sense of we imposing this language on the universe. It's an evidence to the fact that we are discovering that the mathematics is structured into the universe. There is a code in the universe. As it says in the Psalms, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the expanse proclaims the work of his hands. Day after day they pour out speech. Night after night they communicate knowledge. We are learning the maths after the universe. And if there is a language in the universe, then there is a language giver. And so we can reason from the base facts to the attributes of God, at least to the divine attributes. And so, brothers and sisters, I just want to read to you, actually, let's see. I want to read to you the words of Gregory of Nyssa. The accord and affinity of all things with one another that is controlled in an orderly and sequential manner is the primal, archetypical, true music. Do you remember the words of Johannes Kepler? How he talked about the music of the heavens? Gregory of Nyssa, just from reading the Psalms, is saying exactly the same thing. It is this music that the conductor of the universe skillfully strikes up in the unspoken speech of wisdom through these ever-occurring movements. And it is because of that Christian worldview that emerges out of Scripture, that emerges out of the teachings of the prophets and the apostles, that Christians have always been comfortable with reason. And we've always been comfortable. And that's why science emerges out of a Christian paradigm. If you've been sold a dodgy car, Muslims, it's time to get into the Rolls Royce. It's time to get into a real faith that has real intellect. Don't be a puppet. Don't be a sheep. Don't be a follower of the crowd. The reality is that the Christian faith, despite what Muslims like to tell themselves, is still a growing religion. And despite Muslims' best efforts, we are growing across the entire Islamic world. So come home and good night.